Let's take a closer look at the latest polling numbers from Nunavut, where the race appears to be shaping up in favor of the New Democratic Party, NDP. NDP leading. Right now, the NDP holds the lead with 43% of the vote. However, with a 15% margin of error, their actual support could range anywhere from 28% to 58%. While this suggests a strong position, the high margin of error adds some uncertainty, making voter turnout and last-minute shifts crucial for their chances. Liberal Party, LPC, in second place. The Liberals are currently polling at 31% with a 14% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 17% to 45%. This keeps them within striking distance of the NDP, and any late surge in momentum could make this a much tighter race. Conservative Party, CPC, trending downward. The Conservatives are sitting at 20% of the vote, but with a 12% margin of error, their actual support could be as low as 8% or as high as 32%. Additionally, the downward trend suggests they are losing ground, which could indicate challenges in gaining traction among voters. Green Party, GPC, at the bottom. The Green Party is polling at 3% with a 5% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 0% to 8%. Given these numbers, they are unlikely to be a major factor in this race. Overall, Nunavut appears to be leaning toward the NDP, but with the high margins of error, the race remains competitive. The Liberals are still in contention, while the Conservatives are struggling to gain ground. With election day approaching, turnout and late campaign efforts will play a crucial role in determining the final outcome. Now, let's take a look at the latest polling numbers from the Northwest Territories, where the Liberal Party, LPC, is in a strong position and likely to come out on top. Liberal Party, LPC, leading. The Liberals are currently leading with 41% of the vote, and with the 11% margin of error, their actual support could range between 30% and 52%. The upward trend suggests that their support is growing, further solidifying their position as the frontrunner. Conservative Party, CPC, in second place. The Conservatives are polling at 26% with a 10% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be anywhere between 16% and 36%. While they are holding second place, they remain significantly behind the Liberals and would need a strong final push to make this a more competitive race. New Democratic Party, NDP, facing a decline. The NDP is close behind at 25% with a 10% margin of error, putting their actual support somewhere between 15% and 35%. However, the downward trend indicates that their support may be slipping, making it more difficult for them to close the gap. Green Party, GPC, at the bottom. The Green Party is polling at 6% with a 6% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 0% to 12%. While they have a small presence, they are unlikely to play a major role in this contest. With the Liberals in the lead and gaining momentum, the Northwest Territories appears to be leaning in their favor. However, with the Conservatives and NDP still in the race, voter turnout and late campaign shifts could still impact the final outcome. As election day nears, all parties will be working hard to secure every last vote. Now let's turn to Yukon, where the race is shaping up to be a true toss-up between the Liberal Party, LPC, and the Conservative Party, CPC, making it one of the most competitive battlegrounds in this election. Liberal Party, LPC, holding a narrow lead. The Liberals are currently polling at 36% with a 10% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be anywhere between 26% and 46%. The upward trend suggests they are gaining momentum, but their lead remains razor thin. Conservative Party, CPC, right behind. The Conservatives are close behind at 34%, also with a 10% margin of error, putting their actual support between 24% and 44%. With both parties within each other's margin of error, this race remains too close to call. New Democratic Party, NDP slipping. The NDP is polling at 21% with an 8% margin of error, meaning their support could range from 13% to 29%. However, the downward trend suggests they are losing ground, making it difficult for them to break into the top two. Green Party, GPC, at the bottom. The Green Party is polling at 7% with a 5% margin of error, meaning their support could be anywhere between 2% and 12%. While they have a presence, they are not expected to play a decisive role in the outcome. With the Liberals and Conservatives neck and neck, Yukon remains one of the tightest races in the country. The NDP is trailing, while the Greens remain a minor factor. As election day approaches, every vote will count, and this contest could come down to last-minute shifts and voter turnout. Next, let's take a look at British Columbia, where the Conservative Party, CPC, holds a solid lead, but the Liberals, LPC, are also gaining momentum. Conservatives leading the race. The Conservative Party is currently ahead with 41% of the vote, and with a 6% margin of error, their actual support could range from 35% to 47%. The upward trend suggests they are gaining momentum, putting them in a strong position heading into election day. Liberals gaining ground. The Liberals are in second place at 31% with a 5% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be between 26% and 36%. They too are on an upward trend, indicating growing support. While they remain behind the Conservatives, a late surge could make this race more competitive. NDP facing a decline. The New Democratic Party, NDP, sits at 19% with a 4% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 15% to 23%. However, the downward trend suggests they are losing ground, making it difficult for them to challenge the top two parties. Green Party at the bottom. The Green Party GPC is polling at 6% with a 3% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be between 3% and 9%. With limited support, they are unlikely to play a decisive role in the outcome. With the Conservatives in the lead and gaining momentum, they are in a strong position in British Columbia. However, the Liberals are also on an upward trend, keeping them in contention. Meanwhile, the NDP is slipping and the Greens remain a minor factor. As election day nears, this contest will come down to whether the Liberals can close the gap or if the Conservatives can maintain their lead. Now let's shift our focus to Alberta, where the Conservative Party, CPC, remains the dominant force, though their support is showing signs of decline. Conservatives in command but facing a decline. The Conservative Party holds a commanding lead at 55%, with a 6% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 49% to 61%. However, the downward trend suggests that their support is slipping, which could open the door for their opponents to gain some ground. Liberals gaining momentum. The Liberal Party, LPC, is currently at 22% with a 5% margin of error, placing their actual support between 17% and 27%. The upward trend indicates growing support, but they still face a significant gap to challenge the Conservatives in this province. NDP losing ground. The New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 14% with a 4% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be anywhere between 10% and 18%. However, the downward trend suggests they are losing traction, making it difficult for them to make significant gains in Alberta. People's Party of Canada, PPC, with minimal support. The People's Party of Canada, PPC, sits at 3% with a 3% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 0% to 6%. With such low numbers, they are unlikely to play a major role in Alberta's overall outcome. Despite a declining trend, the Conservatives still hold a dominant lead in Alberta. Meanwhile, the Liberals are showing signs of growth, though they remain far behind. The NDP is slipping, and the PPC remains a minor player. With the election day approaching, the key question will be whether the Conservatives can maintain their stronghold or if the Liberals can continue to gain ground. Now let's take a look at the latest polling numbers from the prairies. where the Conservative Party, CPC, remains in the lead but is seeing a decline in support. Conservatives leading but facing a decline. The Conservatives are currently at 48% with a 6% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 42% to 54%. However, the downward trend suggests they are losing some ground, though they still hold a comfortable lead. Liberals gaining support. The Liberal Party, LPC, is in second place at 26% with a 5% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be anywhere between 21% and 31%. The upward trend indicates growing momentum, making them the biggest challenger to the Conservatives in the region. NDP losing ground. The New Democratic Party, NDP, sits at 16% with a 4% margin of error, putting their actual support between 12% and 20%. The downward trend suggests they are losing traction, making it harder for them to compete for second place. Green Party, GPC, and People's Party, PPC, with minimal support. Both the Green Party and the People's Party of Canada, PPC, are polling at 3%, with margins of error of 2% and 3% respectively. This means their actual support could be between 1% and 6%, keeping them as minor players in this region. While the Conservatives still lead, their declining support leaves room for the Liberals to gain ground. Meanwhile, the NDP is slipping, and both the Greens and PPC remain non-factors in the overall race. As election day approaches, the key question will be whether the Liberals can close the gap or if the Conservatives can hold on to their lead despite their downward trend. Now let's turn to Ontario, where the race is incredibly tight between the Conservatives, CPC, and the Liberals, LPC, making this province a key battleground in the election. Conservatives holding a narrow lead but slipping. The Conservatives are currently at 41% with a 6% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range between 35% and 47%. However, the downward trend suggests they are losing ground, making their lead more vulnerable. Liberals closing in with growing support. The Liberals are right behind at 39%, also with a 6% margin of error, placing their actual support between 33% and 45%. With an upward trend, they are gaining momentum, making this a true toss-up as election day approaches. NDP falling behind. The New Democratic Party, NDP, sits at 12% with a 4% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be between 8% and 16%. The downward trend indicates they are losing traction, reducing their ability to be a major challenger in Ontario. Smaller parties with limited impact. The Green Party, GPC, is polling at 4% with a 3% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 1% to 7%. Meanwhile, the People's Party of Canada, PPC, stands at 3%, meaning their support could be anywhere between 0% and 6%. Both remain minor players in this election. Ontario is shaping up to be a high-stakes battleground, with the Conservatives holding a slight lead but trending downward, while the Liberals are gaining momentum and could overtake them. Meanwhile, the NDP is struggling, and smaller parties remain non-factors. With margins this close, turnout and last-minute shifts could decide Ontario's outcome, making it one of the most important provinces to watch on election night. Now let's take a look at Quebec, where the Liberals, LPC, hold the lead but face strong competition from the Bloc Québécois, BQ, and the Conservatives, CPC. Liberals leading and gaining momentum. The Liberal Party sits at 34% with a 5% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 29% to 39%. The upward trend suggests they are gaining momentum, positioning them as the front-runners in Quebec. Bloc Québécois in a competitive second place. The Bloc Québécois is polling at 29% with a 4% margin of error, putting their actual support between 25% and 33%. While they remain competitive, they will need a strong final push to challenge the Liberals for the top spot. Conservatives holding a solid third place. The Conservatives are at 24%, with a 4% margin of error, meaning their support could be anywhere between 20% and 28%. While they are behind the Bloc and the Liberals, they remain a significant factor in the province's race. NDP and Greens with limited support. The NDP is polling at 8% with a 3% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be between 5% and 11%. Meanwhile, the Green Party, GPC, sits at 3% with a 2% margin of error, keeping both parties in a minor role in this election. Quebec remains a competitive battleground, with the Liberals leading and gaining ground, while the Bloc Québécois is still within striking distance. The Conservatives hold a solid third place, while the NDP and Greens remain on the sidelines. With the race still fluid, voter turnout and late campaign efforts could determine who comes out on top in this crucial province. Now let's take a look at Atlantic Canada, where the Liberal Party, LPC, holds a commanding lead, while the Conservatives, CPC, are seeing a decline in support. Liberals leading and gaining momentum. The Liberals are at 48% with a 7% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 41% to 55%. The upward trend suggests they are gaining momentum, further solidifying their position as the dominant party in the region. Conservatives in second but trending downward. The Conservatives are polling at 33% with a 6% margin of error, placing their actual support between 27% and 39%. However, the downward trend indicates that they are losing support, making it harder for them to close the gap with the Liberals. NDP slipping in the region. The New Democratic Party, NDP, sits at 12% with a 4% margin of error, meaning their support could range from 8% to 16%. The downward trend suggests they are losing ground, reducing their chances of making a significant impact in this election. Green Party with limited influence. The Green Party, GPC, is polling at 4% with a 3% margin of error, meaning their actual support could range from 1% to 7%. With such low numbers, they are unlikely to play a major role in the region's results. With the Liberals strengthening their lead, they appear well positioned to dominate Atlantic Canada. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are struggling with a downward trend, and the NDP is also losing ground. With Election Day approaching, the Liberals look to be in control, but the final outcome will still depend on turnout and last-minute shifts in voter sentiment.